A billionaire CEO laughed when the janitor's daughter claimed she could fix their impossible engine. But when she stepped up to the console, what she uncovered left the entire boardroom stunned into silence. This isn't just a story about genius. It's a story about legacy, truth, and a young woman who changed everything without a title or a degree. And trust me, you'll never look at just the janitor's kid the same way again. The boardroom was a shrine to power. Polished mahogany table, sleek glass panels, and a panoramic view of the skyline. Executives in tailored suits leaned back in ergonomic chairs, sipping espresso as they watched the colossal hunk of machinery in the corner. A prototype engine that had cost millions and so far delivered nothing but silence and shame. "This thing should have changed the industry," muttered one VP. "Instead, it's a $12 million paperweight." Then came the sound no one expected, a mop bucket's wheels squeaking across the tile. Rosa stood in the doorway, 16, in worn sneakers and a too-big hoodie, clutching a binder filled with notes. She had been waiting outside for over an hour listening. Her father, the building's janitor, had warned her not to bother the real engineers, but Rosa couldn't stay silent any longer. "I think I know what's wrong with it," she said, her voice firm despite the weight of a dozen skeptical stares. A ripple of amusement swept through the room. "Excuse me?" the CEO said, removing his glasses and squinting at her like she was a glitch in the system. "I've been studying your schematics," Rosa continued. "And the CEO chuckled, cutting her off. "Oh, I see. The janitor's daughter has cracked what MIT PhDs couldn't. Well, go on then. Fix it." The room laughed. A cruel, effortless laugh, the kind reserved for people they believed didn't belong. Rosa's father stepped in, red-faced, whispering for her to leave before she embarrassed herself. But Rosa didn't move. She placed her binder on the table like a lawyer presenting evidence. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were locked in. "You said it yourself," she replied. "You've got nothing to lose." The room quieted. The mockery faded into murmurs. Something in her tone cut through the arrogance, sharp, deliberate, unafraid. The CEO leaned back, waving a dismissive hand toward the engine. "Fine. Impress us." And just like that, Rosa stepped forward, not with a technician's credentials, but with something more dangerous: truth, confidence, and a mind that refused to be ignored. No one knew it yet, but the moment she reached for the tools, the tide had already turned. She's not just the janitor's daughter. As Rosa approached the dormant engine, a hush fell over the room. The clinking of her binder's metal rings echoed louder than the murmurs of disbelief now rippling across the table. She knelt beside the machine, like it was an old friend, running her fingers over the carbon casing, her eyes scanning the control array. Not with curiosity, but with the silent calculation of someone who'd seen it all before. A junior engineer, barely older than Rosa, leaned toward the VP beside him. "Wait, I think I've seen her before," he whispered. "She used to come in late nights. Her dad would clean the lab floors and she'd just sit there, watching." Watching wasn't the half of it. Every night after her homework was done and her father's shift began, Rosa would retreat to the engineering bay, headphones in, eyes locked on design schematics left on whiteboards. She'd memorize them like bedtime stories, not out of ambition, but survival. Her mother had passed when she was 8, and the world hadn't made room for her since. This lab, these engines, they were the only places that made sense. "Who is this girl?" someone muttered. The CTO, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, finally spoke. "That's Rosa Delgado," she said slowly, sitting forward. "She's not just here because of her father. She used to sit in on her uncle's lectures at MIT. Professor Elias Delgado, genius in mechanical logic systems, died last year." The room shifted. "I remember him," another executive said, now suddenly serious. "He was working on experimental energy routing systems before he passed. Said he had a niece smarter than half his grad students." Rosa didn't look up. She had already removed 2 housing panels and laid them gently on the floor. "The problem isn't the engine," she said, her voice calm, almost absent-minded. "It's the interface. Your design's beautiful, but you're feeding it instructions like it's 2015. This system's trying to talk, and no one's listening. She adjusted a cable, rewrote a node, and tapped into the software panel with custom code she had handwritten in her notebook during night shifts. Suddenly, the laughing had stopped for good, because it was now undeniable. Rosa knew exactly what she was doing. You gave it commands. She gave it language. The tension in the room shifted from amusement to unease. Rosa stood over the console with sleeves rolled to her elbows, revealing ink stains and faint burns. Scars of someone who didn't just read about machines, but lived among them. She tapped the touchscreen lightly, almost affectionately, before accessing the system's core interface. The lead engineer, a man in his 50s with 2 decades of patents under his belt, scoffed from across the table. She's just guessing. The CTO didn't respond. She was already watching Rosa's every move. The girl didn't hesitate. You were routing energy through sequence C instead of sequence E, she said aloud. That creates a loop delay of 2.6 seconds every cycle, which destabilizes the core. That's why it shuts down when you try to scale. Silence. She looked up, her gaze direct. I assume that's why you've been stuck for 3 months? A few engineers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. No one had mentioned the 3-month stall publicly, not even in internal memos. How did you? The lead engineer began, but Rosa had already moved to the back panel. Your sensor mesh is solid, but it's talking to firmware that's prehistoric, she continued, popping open a vent and pointing to a blinking circuit. You're using a version of the communications protocol from 5 years ago. It's like trying to stream 4K video through dial-up. Her fingers moved fast, rewriting a portion of the code on a portable terminal she had built herself, repurposed from parts no one even noticed were missing. A few of the younger developers leaned forward, eyes widening as lines of sleek, optimized code filled the screen. This shouldn't be possible, one whispered. She's doing in minutes what our team couldn't in months, said another. At the table, the CEO's amusement had evaporated. His jaw tightened as he watched her work, that smug confidence now replaced with something new, discomfort. Rosa wasn't some lucky guesser. She wasn't a fluke. She was fluent, a native speaker of a language his own company barely understood. And worst of all, she made it look effortless. As she closed the panel and wiped her hands on her jeans, Rosa looked up at the stunned room and said, You didn't build a bad engine. You just forgot to listen to it. It was the kind of line that would echo far beyond those glass walls. Is this a stunt? Some kind of setup? By now, Rosa had the full attention of everyone in the room. What began as a mockery had turned into a masterclass, unfolding in real time. Executives who moments ago smirked behind their espresso cups now sat rigid, their gazes darting between Rosa and the reactivated console. Even the head of product development, once so confident in his team's design, looked like he was questioning the last 6 months of his life. Then came the whispers. Is this real? Someone must have briefed her. Did legal approve this? The CEO stood with arms folded, his expression unreadable, eyes narrowing on Rosa like she was a disruption to be contained. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who walked in through the service elevator, but it was the CTO, quietly analyzing from her seat, who broke the silence. She's not making it up, she said flatly. I just cross-checked her firmware notes with our internal diagnostics. She found 2 routing errors and a logic loop no one on our team noticed. The lead engineer's face went pale. At that, Rosa turned slightly toward them. Not cocky, not defiant, just certain. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone, she said, her voice steady. But if you're building a machine this advanced, you can't treat it like a status symbol. It's not a trophy. It's a language waiting to be understood. She adjusted the last setting, then looked at the CEO. Power it on. He hesitated. The idea of handing control, even symbolically, to a janitor's daughter in front of his entire leadership team? Unthinkable. And yet, no one else had gotten it this far. Reluctantly, he gave a nod to one of the techs. A hum filled the room. Low, smooth, controlled. The lights on the console flickered, then stabilized into a solid green glow. Everyone froze. For the first time since its expensive, frustrating debut, the prototype engine had initialized without crashing. The intern near the back whispered, "She did it!" And just like that, the boardroom split. Half stared in awe, eyes wide with recognition of brilliance. The other half? Silent, because nothing was more dangerous to their egos than being bested by a teenager in sneakers. But Rosa didn't care who believed in her. She wasn't there to be liked. She was there to be heard. That sound? That's the future. And she lit the match. The engine's soft hum deepened, rising into a steady, pulsing rhythm that sent vibrations through the boardroom floor. The display monitors, dormant for weeks, sprang to life. Real-time diagnostics streamed across the screens. Fuel efficiency stabilized, core temperature optimal, system response flawless. No smoke, no sparks, no failure. The impossible machine had awakened. A stunned hush swept through the room like a wave. Executives leaned forward in their chairs, wide-eyed and speechless. Engineers exchanged glances that wavered between disbelief and awe. The engine wasn't just running, it was thriving. Rosa stepped back, wiping her hands, calm as ever. Her work was done, and she knew it. But the room was only just beginning to process what had happened. "Is this a simulation?" one board member finally asked, as if desperate to cling to doubt. "No," the CTO replied, her voice tinged with reverence. "This is real. She actually did it." The younger engineers, those who had quietly followed Rosa's adjustments, started clapping, one by one at first until the room erupted in a standing ovation. Even a few of the skeptics couldn't resist joining in. They weren't just applauding the engine. They were applauding her, all except the CEO. He remained frozen, his pride a silent anchor. Applause had never made him feel so small. "Turn it off," he said abruptly. The room quieted. "It's not stable. It could be a fluke." "No," Rosa said, stepping forward. "It's not a fluke. It's a fix. One your team missed because you were too busy looking past people like me." She didn't raise her voice, didn't puff her chest. She didn't need to. That quiet confidence was louder than any accusation. Then, as if fate had been waiting for the perfect cue, a journalist in the corner, there for what was supposed to be a press preview of a failure, stood up. She had captured everything on camera: the engine, the silence, the applause. "Miss, what's your name?" she asked gently. Rosa looked at her, then at the whole room. "Rosa Delgado," she said. "I'm the janitor's daughter, and I'm the reason your engine breathes." And just like that, the story rewrote itself, right in front of the very men who thought they owned the ending. She didn't just fix the engine, she exposed the truth behind it. As the applause died down and the engine continued to purr in perfect rhythm, Rosa walked to the head of the table. Her father stood frozen by the door, eyes filled with pride and disbelief. The CEO looked like he wanted to rewind time. But Rosa, calm, measured, was already opening her binder. "There's something else you need to know," she said, flipping to a worn dog-eared page. The CTO leaned in. So did the journalist. Rosa held up a schematic, not the digital kind, a hand-drawn blueprint inked in careful lines and notations, with smudges of grease along the edges. A name signed at the bottom, Professor Elias Delgado, her uncle. "You said this prototype was original," she began, "but it's not. I recognized the core model the moment I saw it. You changed the shell, updated the surface design, but the guts of this engine, the sequencing structure, the interface theory, they're his." Murmurs erupted. "Wait, are you saying—" "Yes," Rosa cut in. "This company used my uncle's unpublished work. He called it pulse logic architecture. He spent years developing it. He died before he could patent it." The CEO's face paled. "I've read through your development notes," Rosa continued. "You didn't just stumble on the same concept. You copied it, down to his mathematical signature embedded in the flow algorithm." She tapped the projection screen, revealing two side-by-side designs, the company's breakthrough and her uncle's old prototype. Identical, a long, painful silence followed. The lead engineer stood, hands trembling slightly. "We acquired some research papers from an independent consultant. We didn't know." "You didn't ask," Rosa replied, "because you never thought the source mattered. You thought no one would notice, and that no one would ever dare to say something." Then she pulled out one final sheet, her uncle's original licensing draft, the one he never got to send, the one naming Rosa as his legal heir. Gasps rippled across the room. The CEO sat down slowly, the weight of what had just happened beginning to settle on his shoulders. In 10 minutes, Rosa had done more than fix an engine. She'd unmasked a theft, exposed a lie, and reminded an entire room of power players that genius doesn't always wear a lab coat. Sometimes it wears sneakers and walks in through the service door. You used her uncle's brilliance. Now you'll answer to his heir. For a moment, no one spoke. The air in the boardroom was thick, part awe, part guilt, part fear. The CEO's fingers tapped nervously against the mahogany table. "Rosa," he said finally, his voice now coated in a new tone. Caution. "Surely there's a way we can work this out. We're all on the same team here." She looked at him, unblinking. "You weren't on my uncle's team when you used his work without credit. You weren't on mine when you mocked me 5 minutes ago. So tell me, when exactly did I become part of your team?" His mouth opened, then closed. The CTO stood up. "She's right," she said, voice sharp. "We've been riding on intellectual property that never belonged to us. If she has documentation, lineage, and working knowledge of the architecture, she has the rightful claim." Several board members looked panicked now. The implications were enormous. Lawsuits, stock dips, press fallout. But Rosa didn't gloat. She simply turned and laid one more document on the table, a certified letter from her uncle's attorney, dated 2 weeks before his death. It named Rosa not only as his heir, but also the successor to his patents in progress, including the pulse logic engine design. "You wanted a fix for your engine," she said, "but what you really need is a reckoning." Then turning to the CTO, "This company has a choice. You can bury this, or you can build something better, with truth at the foundation." The journalist in the back had stopped taking notes and was simply staring, wide-eyed. She knew she was witnessing not just a story, but a movement. The CEO's face had gone red, then pale, then unreadable. Finally, with all eyes on him, he forced a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Let's talk partnership," he said through gritted teeth, but Rosa didn't flinch. "Let's talk justice first." Suddenly, the room didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to her, the janitor's daughter who fixed what a $1 million think tank couldn't, the girl they dismissed who now held the company's future in her hands, and the heir to a genius they tried to erase. In that boardroom, surrounded by stunned silence and stunned faces, Rosa Delgado didn't just reclaim her uncle's legacy, she became it. She walked in as the janitor's daughter. She left as the architect of a new era. The sun had begun to set by the time Rosa stepped out of the glass tower. Behind her, the boardroom was still buzzing. Lawyers reviewing documents, PR teams scrambling to contain what would soon become a national headline. But none of that mattered now. Rosa stood at the top of the steps, her father beside her. He looked at her the way a man does when watching a miracle unfold. She wasn't just his little girl anymore. She was a force the world would never again overlook. "I told your mother you'd build something big," he said, eyes glistening. Rosa smiled. "I didn't build it alone. Uncle Elias started it. I just made sure they remembered his name." And they would. The next morning, every major tech outlet ran the headline: "Janitor's daughter exposes billion-dollar theft and fixes the impossible engine." Within 48 hours, the company announced a formal partnership with Rosa Delgado, naming her lead systems architect of the Pulse Logic initiative. But the real news came later that week, when Rosa rejected a private settlement offer worth $12 million. Instead, she founded Delgado Dynamics, a startup dedicated to open-source innovation, ethical engineering, and mentorship programs for underrepresented youth in STEM. She funneled her uncle's legacy and her own genius into something bigger than profit. When asked in an interview why she turned down the money, Rosa's answer was simple: because I'm not here to cash in. I'm here to build a world where no one has to sneak into a boardroom to be heard. Her story spread like wildfire across classrooms, engineering forums, women in tech panels. A generation of young inventors, coders, and dreamers now had a new name to look up to. Not a CEO in a suit, not a billionaire in a corner office, but a girl in worn-out sneakers who dared to speak up. At the unveiling of her company's first solo prototype, faster, cleaner, and more efficient than the one she fixed, Rosa looked at the crowd and said, "Don't wait for the world to invite you in. Sometimes you have to walk through the service door and rewrite the blueprint." And just like that, she didn't just finish the story, she started a revolution. Rosa's story reminds us all, true brilliance doesn't come from titles or fancy offices. It comes from passion, perseverance, and the courage to speak up when others won't listen. So the next time someone tells you who you are or what you can't do, remember, sometimes the most powerful voices come from the most unexpected places. Because real change, it's made by those brave enough to rewrite the rules.